Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing climate change, about climate change, things adjacent. The lighting is this much better tonight, maybe not too much better from the last video. I'm scraping together just whatever few minutes of the day I have in order to do these videos, so it's going to take me a little while to figure out the lighting situation. I have to close the door to my space now because my new family member is going to come in and just knock everything over. So I don't need every single video to be a struggle with that. So thank you all for commenting and discussing on the last video. I know, every time I bring up certain subjects, it causes people, a lot of distress. So don't be distressed. I'm trying to elucidate the best I can on some things which maybe people understand or maybe they don't. I don't know. The reason why I talk about Q is because I'm absolutely positive nobody on this channel follows Q, and if you followed Q, you would actually understand a few things about it that people don't generally understand. And it's funny because when I start talking about Q, people start telling me all about Q, but they don't follow Q, so they don't know what they're talking about. It's kind of like people, who don't follow Arctic ice melt at all, talking about Arctic ice melt, and they don't know what they're talking about. I understand we all have our opinions, but if your opinions are from something that's, way far away, trust me that I'm trying to just give you some information that might be helpful. That's all. Very quickly, my actual thoughts on Q are this: that it is a propaganda, a psyop operation in order to keep people rallying behind Trump, while Trump does, regular president type stuff, basically, and he's screwing up big time, and he's, and there are definite, on the right, there's, this one angle on every single news story that's totally different from the left. And I'm not saying that one or the other is correct. Somewhere in between, or, one or the other might be correct, but we don't know all the time which one, because all the people on the right, all the people that follow Q, obviously, they all think what they think, and they will not budge. Anyways, but quickly, I do think that Q is actually working with the Trump administration, that it is somebody that's close to Trump. Trump knows about Q. There have been way too many proofs, as they call them. There's been way too many things that have happened. Q has said some stuff about things that happened beforehand, before they happened, that you would never know unless you were close to, the administration or close to Trump. You would never know these things. So there's just no way it's just some dude out there going I'm going to just mess with everybody's head. It just wouldn't be possible. That being said, that makes it even more frightening, right? It is somebody working within the Trump administration or close to Trump, and they're running propaganda on people. So that's basically, for the most part, what it is. But I do, I follow it because it's super interesting. And, sometimes it's interesting when somebody says something, like, hey guys, this is going to happen. And then it happens. You're all, and, people in the mainstream media are like, what the hell? What is that? What happened? What's going on? We don't know, because they're not listening to somebody who's going, hey guys, here's what's going to happen. That's all I'm going to say about that. I'm going to move on to climate change stuff. Sorry guys for taking up so much time at the beginning of this video, but I thought those were important things to talk about. I'm going to read something from Nick Humphrey. I think this is one of his latest posts. November 2018, yet another top 5 month. Data sets by NASA, WF Europe, and JMA Japan confirmed that November 2018 was at least the 5th warmest on record and possibly as warm as the 2nd warmest. Linear change in global average annual temperature, 2008 to 2018. Most robust temperature rises have been in the high northern latitudes, Western North America, much of Eurasia, and Northern Australia. The global rise is nearly 0.4 C this past decade. Looking at these maps, one standout on the November 2018 map is the abnormal cold over Central and Eastern North America. Typically, abnormal cold by the standards of recent decades is near normal by standards of the early 20th century. This is because of the domination of long-term global warming over cold spells. However, it was notably cold over the central U.S. even for the early 20th century climate, with some areas seeing a top 10 coldest November, including my city of Lincoln, Nebraska. Here's how cold the cold wave compared to recent decades. The temperatures those born in the 1980s onwards are used to experiencing. Note how most of the other below normal temperatures of the recent decades around the world are actually still abnormally warm or near normal compared to the late 19th or early 20th century. This shows how exceptional the cold snap was in the face of globally averaged warming. The main culprit for this is the increasingly wavy jet stream caused by amplified warming of the Arctic. As the Arctic warms, the wider temperature gradient with the mid-latitudes weakens. The weakening horizontal thermal gradient caused by the warming Arctic atmosphere thermally expands upward like a balloon, reduces the pressure gradient as well, weakening the jet stream winds, which are a balance of the pressure gradient force, which wants to send air from the tropics to the poles, and the Coriolis force, which deflects paths to the right in northern hemisphere. Jet streams can be explained as follows. If two air masses of different temperature meet, the resulting pressure difference is highest at altitude. What results from this weakening? Weaker pressure gradient, slower winds, weaker Coriolis force, depending on wind speed, much wavier jet stream with large, slow-moving waves capable of heat extremes, but a region or two receiving a cold extreme. As the cold spreads out, the heat warms the Arctic even more, a feedback loop. Expect this to continue with more wild swings in temperature conditions, which can impact human health, plant and animal health, and biological cycles, as well as crop planting in the spring. In fact, very abnormal warmth now is likely to close out December for North America. While extreme cold will impact parts of Eastern Europe and Central Asia, see my weekly presentation on the specific climate drivers involving this. All right, good article from Nick. Moving on to this article, global wheat supply falls to crisis levels. Big China stocks won't provide relief. This is from the Independent IE. U.S. farmers could be winners as global supplies tighten. Almost half of global wheat stocks are in China. Potential record crop in Argentina may provide some respite. Scorching hot, dry summer has ended 5 years of plenty in many wheat-producing countries and drawn down the reserves of major exporters to their lowest levels since 2007-08, when low grain stocks contributed to food riots across Africa and Asia. Although global stocks are expected to hit an all-time high of 273 million tons at the start of 2018-19 grain marketing season, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture estimates, the problem is nearly half of it is in China, which is not likely to release any onto global markets. Experts predict by the end of the season, the 8 major exporters will be left with 20% of world stocks, just 26 days of cover. Wow. Down from 1/3 a decade ago. The USDA estimates that China, which consumes 16% of the world's wheat, will hold 46% of its stocks at the beginning of the season, which starts around now, and more than half by the end. The 126.8 million tons China is estimated to hold is up 135% from 54 million 5 years earlier. People need to get rid of China stocks in their calculations. If you do that, it's just exceptionally tight, said Don Bassey, president of Ag Resource Company in Chicago. A repeat of the 2007-08 crisis, which forced many countries to limit or ban exports is unlikely in the absence of other drivers at the time, including $150 per pound per barrel crude oil. The recent 3-year high for wheat prices of $5.93 a bushel on the Chicago Board of Trade pales in comparison to the high of $13.34 a bushel in February 2008. Importers in North Africa also appear to be better placed this time with higher stocks of their own. It could have an impact on food inflation, but in North African countries that have a good crop this year, fortunately, so their reliance is not as big as in the past years, said Abdul Reza Abbasian, chief economist of the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. I don't think we want to be alarmist in terms of consequences, he added. China started stockpiling wheat in 2006, setting a guaranteed floor price to ensure food security and stability at around $9.75 a bushel. As of last week, Chinese prices are now so high that they cannot sell internationally without incurring a major loss. Rabobank analyst Charles Clack said he expected China to continue to build stocks into next year, but in the long term, it would look to reduce reserves by curbing domestic production, reducing imports, or conducting internal auctions. It will be a slow process. I wouldn't expect exports to come flying out anytime soon. Government wheat reserves now total nearly 74 million tons, according to Shanghai JC Intelligence Company Limited, most of it from 2014 to 2017, but a small amount as old as 2013. Sylvia Shi, analyst at JC Intelligence, said China would continue to import wheat it cannot produce in sufficient volumes to help meet a growing appetite for high-protein varieties for products like bread and other baked products as diets become more westernized. Drought, the wheat crop in several of the world's biggest exporters, Argentina, Australia, Canada, the European Union, Kazakhstan, Russia, Ukraine, and the United States, has suffered this year. A spring drought in the Black Sea breadbaskets, Russia and Ukraine, was swiftly followed by a summer heat wave in the European Union. Dry weather now also threatens crops in another important exporter, Australia. Evidence of the serious harm done has grown as harvesting progresses. Forecasts for the 28-member European Union have been repeatedly cut, with Germany set for its lowest grain harvest in 24 years after crops wilted under the highest summer temperatures since record began in 1881. Wow. Russia's agriculture ministry held a meeting with grain traders on Friday to discuss export volumes. The ministry denied export limits were discussed, but traders, some of whom at the meeting said curbs might be imposed later in the season following complaints from domestic meat producers about the rising cost of animal feed. Sorry, this is a longer article than I thought it was, but it's very interesting, so I'm going to keep reading it. The United States is best placed to capitalize on the shortfall in global supply with much higher stocks than rival exporters and a rising production. The outlook provides a much-needed boost for U.S. farmers caught in the crossfire of a trade war with China, a huge importer of U.S. soybeans and corn, as well as Mexico and Japan, two of the top buyers of U.S. wheat. The winner in the long term is the U.S., as they should get some demand flow back to them. It has been several years since we have seen the U.S. be in a position to get demand, said Matt Ammerman, a commodity risk manager with Intel FC Stone. The Black Sea and Europe look set to lose market share. Canada, one of the world's biggest high-quality wheat exporters, is expected to enjoy bigger yields than last year, according to a recent crop tour, but patchy rains have left crops highly variable across Western provinces. We don't have a bin buster coming. I just don't see how we can push exports too much higher, said Patterson grain trader Ryle Doyle. Southern response to major wheat exporters in the Southern Hemisphere, Argentina and Australia, are still months away from harvest. A record crop is forecast in Argentina, but production in Australia is expected to fall to the lowest level in more than a decade due to drought across the East Coast. Francisco Abello, who manages 7,000 hectares of land in western north-central Buenos Aires province, said he and other growers are out to take advantage of high prices by investing in fertilizers to increase yields. Oh boy. We are having a great start to the season, Abello said. The ground was moist at planting time. Then it was cold and dry, which are the best conditions for the early wheat growing season. The Buenos Aires Grain Exchange has a preliminary wheat harvest estimate of 19 million tons, above what it says is the current record, 17.6 0.75 million tons. In Australia, the outlook is less rosy. Analysts said production could fall below 20 million tons for the first time since 2008, although it's still likely to be well in excess of that year's crop of just 13 million tons. The west of the country is looking good, so the largest producing region could produce in excess of 9 million tons alone. That may keep the headline number up, said Finn Zebel, an agribusiness economist at the National Australia Bank. But with dry weather reducing output on the east, it could reduce exports nationally. Okay. And there was another article I wanted to read. Where are you? Well, I don't know if I'm going to read the whole thing of this, but I'm going to start and link it below. This is from the New York Times, titled, "Would Human Extinction Be a Tragedy? Our species possesses inherent value, but we are devastating the earth and causing unimaginable animal suffering. There are stirrings of discussion these days." When is this? The date is today. There are stirrings of discussion these days in philosophical circles about the prospect of human extinction. Only in philosophical circles. Maybe this is a philosophical circle. Given the increasingly threatening predations of climate change. In reflection on this question, I want to suggest an answer to a single question, one that hardly covers the whole philosophical territory, but is an important aspect of it. Would human extinction be a tragedy? To get a bead on this question, let me distinguish it from a couple other related questions. I'm not asking whether the experience of humans coming to an end would be a bad thing. In these pages, Samuel Scheffler has given us an important reason to think that it would be. I am also not asking whether human beings as a species deserve to die out. That is an important question, but would involve different considerations. Those questions and others like them need to be addressed if we are to come to a full moral assessment of the prospect of our demise. Yet what I'm asking here is simply whether it would be a tragedy if the planet no longer contained human beings. The answer I'm going to give might seem puzzling at first. I want to suggest, at least tentatively, both that it would be a tragedy and that it might just be a good thing. To make that claim less puzzling, let me say a word about tragedy. In theater, the tragic character is often someone who commits a wrong, usually a significant one, but with whom we feel sympathy in their descent. Here, Sophocles' Oedipus, Shakespeare's Lear, and Arthur Miller's Willy Loman might stand as examples. In this case, the tragic character is humanity. It is humanity that is committing a wrong whose elimination would likely require the elimination of the species, but with whom we might be sympathetic nonetheless for reasons I discuss in a moment. To make that case, let me start with a claim that I think will be at once depressing and, upon reflection, uncontroversial. Human beings are destroying large parts of the inhabitable earth and causing unimaginable suffering to many of the animals that inhabit it. This is happening through at least three means. First, human contributions to climate change is devastating ecosystems, as the recent article on Yellowstone Park in the Times exemplifies. Second, increasing human population is encroaching on ecosystems that would otherwise be intact. Third, factory farming fosters the creation of millions upon millions of animals for whom it offers nothing but suffering and misery before slaughtering them in often barbaric ways. There is no reason to think that those practices are going to diminish anytime soon. Quite the opposite. Humanity, then, is the source of devastation of the lives of conscious animals on a scale that is difficult to comprehend. To be sure, nature itself is hardly a Valhalla of peace and harmony. Animals kill other animals regularly, often in ways that we, although not they, would consider cruel. But there is no other creature in nature whose predatory behavior is remotely as deep or as widespread as the behavior we display toward what the philosopher Christian Korsgaard aptly calls our fellow creatures in a sensitive book of the same name. If this were all to the story, there would be no tragedy. The elimination of the human species would be a good thing, full stop. But there is more to the story. Human beings bring things to the planet that other animals cannot. For example, we bring an advanced level of reason that can experience wonder at the world in a way that is foreign to most, if not all, other animals. We create art of various kinds, literature, music, and painting among them. We engage in sciences that seek to understand the universe and our place in it. We Were our species to go extinct, all of that would be lost. Now, there might be those on the more jaded side who would argue that if we went extinct, there would be no loss because there would be no one for whom it would be a loss not to have access to those things. I think this objection misunderstands our relation to those practices. We appreciate and often participate in such practices because we believe they are good to be involved in, because we find them to be worthwhile. It is the goodness of the practices and the experiences that draws us. Therefore, it would be a loss to the world if those practices and experiences ceased to exist. One could press the objection here by saying that it would only be a loss from a human viewpoint. But that viewpoint would no longer exist if we went extinct. This is true. But this entire set of reflections is taking place from a human viewpoint. We cannot ask the questions we are asking here without situating them within the human practice of philosophy. Even to ask the question of whether it would be a tragedy if humans were to disappear from the face of the planet requires a normative framework that is restricted to human beings. Let's turn then and take the question from the other side, the side of those who think that human extinction would be both a tragedy and overall a bad thing. Doesn't the existence of those practices outweigh the harm we bring to the environment and the animals within it? Don't they justify the continued existence of our species, even granting the suffering we bring to so many non-human lives? To address that question, let's ask another one. How many human lives would it be worth sacrificing to preserve the existence of Shakespeare's works? If we were required to engage in human sacrifice in order to save his works from eradication, how many humans would be too many? For my own part, I think the answer is one. One human life would be too many, or to prevent quibbling, one innocent human life, at least to mine. Whatever the number, though, it is going to be quite low. Or suppose a terrorist planted a bomb in the Louvre, and the first responders had to choose between saving several people in the museum and saving the art. How many of us would seriously consider saving the art? So then, how much suffering and death of non-human life would we be willing to countenance to save Shakespeare or science, or sciences, or so forth, unless we believe there is such a profound moral gap between the status of human and non-human animals? Whatever reasonable answer we come up with will well be surpassed by the harm and suffering we inflict upon animals. There is just too much torment wreaked upon too many animals and too certain a prospect that this is going to continue and probably increase. It would overwhelm anything we might place on the other side of the ledger. Moreover, those among us who believe that there is such a gap should perhaps become more familiar with the richness of lives of many of our conscious fellow creatures. Our own science is revealing that richness to us, ironically giving us a reason to eliminate it along with our own continued existence. One might ask here whether, given this view, it would also be a good thing for those of us who are currently here to end our lives in order to prevent further animal suffering. That's an excellent question. Although I do not have a final answer to this question, we should recognize that the case of future humans is very different from the case of currently existing humans. Wow, actually, I never really thought about that. What if the answer to overpopulation and human destruction was like mass suicide? I know it's like a bizarre question. Maybe, I don't know. It's not that bizarre, actually. Like, you know, I mean, humans have been known to do really kooky things. Like, we all think that we have these like moral standards, or like, these moral guardrails, that define our, humanism, or our humanity is the word I was trying to look for. But, humans over time have done some really like insane things, some very savage, bizarre things. And some of those things are just, have been looked at as normal in a certain period of history. Anyways, people have sacrificed themselves for worthy causes. People have gone on hunger strikes. People have committed suicide, Harry, or suicide rituals in order to, for a cause. Anyways, whatever. What if an adjacent movement started, adjacent to the Extinction Rebellion, which was like extinction extermination, or not extermination, but extinction. What would you call it? I mean, whatever. Extinction suicide squads, where basically, I'm not giving anybody any ideas. Not at all. I'm just saying, if people were that upset about humanity's, what humanity's done to the earth, like, take yourself out. I don't know. Do I want to take myself out? No. We're all going to do that pretty soon anyways, but sorry, that was a really just super random, like, little segue there, or tangent. Although I do not have a final answer to the question, we should recognize that the case of future humans is very different from the case of currently existing humans. To demand of currently existing humans that they should end their lives would introduce significant suffering among those who have much to lose by dying. In contrast, preventing future humans from existing does not introduce such suffering, since those human beings will not exist and therefore not have lives to sacrifice. The two situations then are not analogs. It may well be then that the extinction of humanity would make the world better off and yet would be a tragedy. I don't want to say this for sure, since the issue is quite complex, but it certainly seems a live possibility, and that by itself disturbs me. There is one more tragic aspect to all of this. In many dramatic tragedies, the suffering of the protagonist is brought about through his or her own actions. It is Oedipus's killing of his father that starts the train of events that leads to his tragic realization, and it is Lear's high-handedness towards his daughter Cordelia that leads to his demise. It may also turn out that it is through our own actions that we human beings bring about our own extinction, or at least something near it, contributing through our practices to our own tragic end. And that is all I have for you this evening. I apologize if my thoughts seemed a little bit out there. I'm exhausted. I'm running like no sleep every single day, and so, I actually started this video like 3 times because I just couldn't really like form too many clear thoughts. Anyways, I'm going to try and go get some sleep right now, and tomorrow I'll come back and I'll be much more refreshed. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed that video. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Until next time, peace.